Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights, won't stop for traffic light.
Hi everyone, and welcome back. My name is Joelle Fawcett, and I am your host and the founder of the SoL Method, where our mission is to be your guide, to heal from the past, be at peace in the present, and create a future you love. And welcome to Season 2, Episode 7 of the SoL Method podcast titled, This is Halloween. And we are taking a complete left turn from the mini-series that we wrapped up last week. For the first bit of Season 2, we have been talking about change. We've been talking about the assignments of relationships. We've been talking about how spirit uses change in your life to propel you into the person you are meant to be in this world, to make manifest all those amazing things that spirit has put on your heart. And now that that has come to a close, we are going to be beginning a new mini-series, which is all about magic. It is about the metaphysical realm, it is about spirit, and about some of the work that I do as a psychic medium. And there is no better time than to start this than on the footsteps of Halloween. And a part of the reason why I really did want to get into this is because, I've said a lot of times on the podcast before about how I am a practicing witch, I am a psychic medium, I'm a Reiki master, and a lot of the times when I say that in public, I get some interesting responses, right? Like that face that you're making right now. Sometimes I get that look. Sometimes people kind of like pull their children away from me. Sometimes people ask me some really interesting questions. And over time, it's really made me realize how there is a lot of misinformation out there about the metaphysical realm, about magic in general, and also what it means to be a modern day witch, what it means to be a practicing witch in today's world. And so I wanted to get into that a little bit on the podcast. And this episode specifically is inspired by a social media post that I saw from one of my friends who is a Christian. And her post simply said, I don't understand why Christians think it's okay to celebrate Halloween. And that really got me thinking. So it took me about 2 minutes of research on the good old internet to realize that there is a ton of misinformation out there about Halloween, where it came from, and everyone's opinions on whether or not it is safe or Christian to celebrate it. And so I really wanted to get into that in the podcast today. And I can promise you that some of the information I will share will surprise you. And story to start out with. So my kids know that I am a practicing witch. Obviously, they see it all around our house. They participate in ritual with me. They know all sorts of different stuff about it. And they'll tell people that their mom's a witch, right? And most of the time people just laugh at that, not really understanding that they're being completely serious, right? And last year when my daughter was in preschool, I heard this from the preschool teacher. They were all sitting in a circle. It was a few days before Halloween, and the teacher was asking them, what are you going to be for Halloween? Like, what are you dressing up as? And this one little girl jumps up and goes, I'm going to be a witch, and I'm going to wear a pointy hat and ride a broom. And my daughter gets up and goes, witches don't wear pointy hats. They have purple hair like my mommy. And apparently the entire class just fell silent. And the teacher had to talk with me about this afterwards to start to understand what the context was. And I just thought it was hysterical because for my kids and for the world that I live in, it's completely normal. Most of my friends know that that's who I am. And I realize there's so much misinformation out there about what that actually means. So specifically on Halloween, let's get into it. So first myth I want to blast through right now, and this is the foundation. Halloween is not a pagan holiday. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Halloween is not a pagan holiday. All right, so all you parents out there, whether you're Christian or the magical realm just makes you feel, a little squiggly inside, y'all can relax, okay? You can stop wrestling with this. Dressing up as a Pokemon and going trick-or-treating is not going to turn your 10-year-old into a spell-casting witch. Okay? It's not going to happen. Halloween is not a pagan holiday. Halloween, as we know it today, is a created holiday and marketing overload experience for the American people. And it was done intentionally by our government and by marketing institutions across our country back in the mid-20th century. And we're going to have a bit of a history lesson today on all of this. Now, yes, do bits and pieces of Halloween have pagan roots? Absolutely. And just about every one of the Christian holidays has pagan roots. Like if you're not going to let your kids go trick-or-treating, you better not be setting up a Christmas tree in your living room this Christmas, because you can thank me and my witchy friends for that one. And I say that kind of jokingly, but I beg us to realize that we're all human. We're all having this human experience. And I absolutely do not judge anyone for following the path that calls to them. If a Christian church calls to you, do that. Do it well. And if that leads you to a life of peace and authenticity, I am so happy for you. That is exactly the life that I want you to live. And I have no desire to push anything that I believe onto you because it's not for you, right? And so I beg my Christian friends to realize that, paganism was here long before you were. And it is completely natural that your holiday traditions would borrow from ours, simply because they were established centuries before Jesus was born on this planet. Right? And even if that kind of makes you ticked off or upset, you can't hate us completely, because it's thanks to us that you wear pants. Pants came from the barbarian pagan Vikings. So that's one little thing you can put in your back pocket that we did share with you guys. So I'm kind of happy about that. Now, let's start at the beginning, right? History lesson. So if Halloween is not a pagan holiday, why is there so much confusion? Right? Why do you do 2 minutes of searching on the internet and it tells you that Halloween is a pagan thing or a ghost thing or a magical thing or all this stuff? Like, why is there that association then? What's going on? Okay, so Halloween, not a pagan holiday. Samhain is the pagan holiday. And Samhain is spelled S-A-M-H-A-I-N, but it's pronounced Samhain, okay? And Samhain is a festival of the dead. It is a fire festival, and it means summer's end. And it is celebrated at the end of harvest, at the beginning of the coldest months of the year. And for many practitioners, myself included, Samhain is considered to be the start of the new year. Now, this holiday originated in Northern Ireland and Scotland as a Celtic fire festival. And now it's celebrated worldwide, right? You can go almost anywhere on the planet and you'll meet people who have beliefs that source from pagan roots, and they celebrate Samhain. And the timing of Samhain is not on a specific day. This is one of the things that makes it very distinct from Halloween. Okay, you can go across the world and you'll find people who celebrate Samhain at various points within about a 3-week time span between mid to end October and the beginning to middle of November. And here's why. All the way back in the 1st century, they didn't have calendars, right? There wasn't like a date on the calendar. And the days of the year aren't always exactly the same according to astrology, which is what gave these people their dates or sense of the year passing, was watching the stars, watching the seasons change, right? And so there are several people who celebrate Samhain at the closest new moon or full moon to Halloween. So for me, I did my thing over the 25th and 26th of this month, a few days ago, which was the new moon and the partial lunar eclipse. Other people just go ahead and stick to the 31st because it's easy, right? Everyone else is celebrating Halloween. It's easy to kind of fit it in there, and there's a lot of energy going on at that time in this country because people are celebrating Halloween. Other people wait a little bit longer until you get a little bit farther into November, where you reach more of the midway point, which would be between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. Okay, again, astrological based dates. So there is no specific day that's going to say this is when Samhain is. It is witch's choice, and whatever people choose, usually they choose it consistently with the people they are practicing with or on their own. And Samhain is one of the 4 Gaelic seasonal festivals. So it is anchored in the quarterly significance of the year passing. And Samhain originates from the sand of time. When you go back to the earliest writings that you can find in Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man, you're going to find people talking about this holiday, whether it's mentioned in legends, in stories, or it's mentioned on ancient writings, ancient calendars, whether they're etched in clay or in stone or whatever it is. This holiday is mentioned over and over and over again. And according to Samhain legend, this is a time like Beltane, which is the opposite. Beltane happens in the summer, spring, summer. This is fall, winter. This is a time when the doorway to the other world is very thin, when the veil is thin, allowing supernatural beings or souls to pass through into our living world. Now, while Beltane is a festival for the living, Samhain is a festival for the dead. And it is seen, like I said, as a time where that boundary between the other world and this world is very, very thin. And the belief is that souls from the other world can pass into this world, as well as the AOC, or like fairies, the fair folk. Now, okay, when we talk about fairies, according to pagan legend, we're not talking about Tinkerbell. Okay, we're talking about mischievous beings, sprites, little gremlins, okay? And during Samhain, familial souls that had passed into the other world were believed to be able to visit us. They were believed to be able to come back. Our ancestors were believed to be able to pass through and visit with our families. And so a visit from the dead during Samhain was considered to be a time of celebration, a time of joy, and a time of happiness. The souls of the dead were thought to revisit their homes for hospitality, for communing, right? Places were set at dinner tables, meals were cooked, and seats by the fire were placed for your ancestors who had gone before you to come back during this time and share their wisdom with you. And just as kind souls that had passed could revisit you, there was also the knowledge that kin who might have some revenge to bestow on you or might be more negative could also return to wreak havoc. Okay, so we have the positive where your ancestors can come back to bestow blessings on you, to share wisdom with you, and to sup with you. We also have the awareness that something negative could also pass through that veil. And this is a time of great awareness. This is a time of burning bonfires and time of communal eating with the souls that have passed before you. Now, I want to establish that it wasn't until Christianity comes into the picture that ghosts or spirits were considered something to be feared. Okay, I know a lot of you probably have seen like Vikings or The Last Kingdom. Like there's a lot of, it's like a theme right now, right? There's a lot of popular shows and movies that have come out, the Northmen, right? That have come out that are on this trend of paganism, of Vikings, of celebrating that culture that really hasn't been explored in this generation of time. So it's a very cool thing right now, right? And you'll see in those movies and in those shows how Christians are shocked by the way that these Vikings talk about and revere death, ghosts, and spirits. They have no fear of them. And that's what the Christians note about these Northmen, is that they have no fear of death. They almost welcome it. They welcome the experience of dying. And it's completely foreign to them. Christians during that time did not understand how someone couldn't fear death, how somebody couldn't be afraid of the ghosts or the spirits or the things of the other world. And this is why. This is because when you grow up in a world where spirits visit you regularly and the veil is thinned at this time of the year and they're welcome into your house and into your home like friends, there's nothing to fear. They're to be respected. Absolutely. Could mischief be caused by a spirit looking to exact revenge or cause a little bit of trouble? Yep. Could something dangerous potentially happen? Yes, absolutely. But it wasn't a fear of the unknown. And that is the big distinction. It was never a fear of the unknown. It was a great respect and a knowledge of what might happen and a welcoming of it. Okay? Now, as we go through this process of Christianity becoming more and more popular, what happens is Christianity historically begins to try to convert pagans to their religion, right? And just about every war in medieval history is about this. It is about religious, God-fearing people thinking they're doing the right thing. And I pass no judgment on history. Whether I like it or not, it happened, right? So the best we can do is learn from it. And so during this time, as we enter the medieval era, the Christian world is wanting to convert a lot of pagans to Christianity. And church leaders attempted to reframe Samhain as a Christian holiday, right? The first attempt from this that my research has gleaned me was done by Pope Boniface in the 5th century, where he moved or tried to move Samhain to May 13th and specified it as a day that honored saints and martyrs. It didn't work. The fire festivals of October and November continued. So there was a bit of a battle there against the Pope and his decree versus pagan tradition. And then in the 9th century, Pope Gregory moved the May 13th celebration to the time of the fire festivals, but he declared it to be All Saints' Day on November 1st, and All Souls' Day he declared would follow on November 2nd. Okay, so now we're having this transition start to happen where it's okay, you don't have to change the dates of your holidays, right? This is what the Christian church told to pagans. You don't have to change the dates of your holidays. We're just going to change the belief systems around it a little bit, right? And this goes for a lot of the major Christian holidays, right? We all know that Jesus Christ wasn't born on December 25th, right? Historically, he absolutely was born at a different time. However, December 25th is centered around a pagan holiday, and it was way easier for pagan communities to transition to celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ if the date didn't change out of just simple human habit. Okay. Now, there's no mention of costumes, tricks, or visiting neighbors until around the 15th century in Scotland. Okay, it probably did happen before that, but as far as like historical texts go, we don't really see that until the 15th century coming up in Scotland. And it was related to Samhain, and the tradition is that people would dress as spirits and go out and visit neighbors to collect food for the Samhain ancestral feasts that would be happening. And they dressed as them for two reasons. One, to attract blessings, to attract the positive souls to follow them for ancestral blessing. And number two, to ward off negative spirits. Okay, also during this time, there is mention of turnips being carved in Scotland, much like our jack-o'-lanterns today, to ward off negative spirits. Okay, they would carve these turnips into scary faces, and it was believed to ward off negative spirits. So that is kind of the earliest time that we start to see some of our current Halloween traditions lining up. Now, I want to be clear about this. The way that these people dressed up as these spirits to go visit homes and receive these offerings for the Samhain meals was not with the same intention as dressing up for Halloween. Okay? And I've talked about this on the podcast a lot before, where energy follows intention. Okay, you want to manifest something, you got to be in an authentic place, but you have to put your energy and intention around it, right? And so if you intend to do something, that's the direction your energy is going to flow. And the intention of these people way back in the day dressing up for Samhain is completely different than the intention of your 10-year-old dressing up as Pokemon. Okay, that's another reason why I really don't see Halloween as a pagan holiday in any way, because the intention and energy behind it is completely different than the ritualistic energy of Samhain, right? Now, the fact that Pope Gregory instituted All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day did not do away with Samhain in the least. And we tried one more time where October 31st was designated as All Hallows' Eve, or Halloween. And this All Hallows' Eve concept adopted a lot of these pagan Samhain ideas, right? So we start to see the transition happen here, where we're trying to make this conversion a little bit easier by borrowing things, borrowing visiting neighbors, borrowing the concept of putting on a costume, okay? And these traditions came over to America with Scottish and Irish immigrants, right? In the later 1800s, a lot of immigrants were coming over to America, and they brought these traditions with them. And in America, Halloween was still not a thing, okay? So we have these immigrants from Scotland coming over to America, immigrants from Ireland coming over to America. And what happens is that things take a completely twisted turn, and All Hallows' Eve becomes a living nightmare. It becomes tradition where October 31st begins to resemble something like the Purge. And this isn't talked about a lot in our history books during the 19th century, but I want to make it clear that, you guys, like, people died. People died because of the ambitiousness of the pranks and mischief that started to be caused on October 31st. And it became so bad. It became so bad that by the time we get to the beginning of the 20th century, the government simply has had enough. The government actually steps in because the mischief has gotten so bad across the country. And if you ever want to go down this rabbit hole, go ahead and look it up. Like, there were, like I said, people died, houses burned, trains were wrecked. Like, big, massive things happened because of the mischief that people were causing on All Hallows' Eve. And many cities started to ban even the brief concept of All Hallows' Eve because of how bad it got, right? So then we hit the beginning of the 20th century. The government physically steps in, right? How can we change this? And what they quickly realize is that they probably can't change it, but they might be able to buy them out, right? We might be able to convert them. Sound familiar? So during the 1930s, now we just hit the Great Depression, right? In America, people don't have a lot of money. People are down in spirits. The entire country is going through a massive challenge right now. And the government and civic organizations step in to intentionally create a national holiday on October 31st called Halloween. They establish costume parades. They start selling these paper things that they called costumes. Okay, costumes did not look like Party City now, right? When we started out, they were made of like paper mache and boxes and like tissue paper sort of material, very thin. And there was not a lot of money during this time, so people would pool their resources and the children would go house to house. The first one, they might pick up some paper mache thing that would resemble a costume of some kind. At the next house, they might get a tiny treat of some variety. And it started to intentionally become something that starts to resemble what we see as Halloween today. Okay, now remember, this was an intentional thing done on the part of the American government to stop the insanity of the mischief of All Hallows Eve. Okay. Now, in the midst of World War II, which happens next, the economy gets kicked into high gear. And this was kind of the final nail in the coffin of the mischief that was happening on All Hallows Eve. Because during World War II, everyone was a patriot. Right? The entire country came together to support the war effort, and youngsters start to take pledges to support the soldiers and sailors abroad and to not engage in Halloween vandalism. Right? It all becomes about protecting America instead of doing harm to your neighbor. And that was an entire paradigm shift around Halloween, All Hallows Eve, and people intentionally pressed away from doing mischief on that night. Now, 1950 has come along, and there are mischief makers out there that aren't ready to be done, but they also don't want to now miss out on this thing called trick-or-treating. So they just changed the date, right? So now October 30th becomes what is known as Mischief Night, and October 31st is reserved for trick-or-treating, and Halloween itself becomes a far tamer thing, mostly due to marketing. No one really knows where the phrase trick-or-treat comes from, but it was very firmly established in American culture in 1951 when trick-or-treating was depicted in a Peanuts comic in the newspaper, and Disney produced a cartoon called Trick or Treat featuring Donald Duck and his nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Never doubt the power of marketing. Right? So at this point, the American government launches a full support. All the money is thrown behind the marketing of this holiday called Halloween for the two purposes. Number one, the economy. There's a lot of money to be made by marketing this idea of trick-or-treating and of Halloween, right? And number two, it completely distracted the American public from ever causing that kind of mischief again. Pretty interesting, huh? And so you know, on average, today Americans spend an estimated $3.1 billion a year on candy for Halloween, according to the National Retail Federation. And the day itself has become the second largest commercial holiday in this country. So now, knowing everything you know now about the history of Halloween and the history of Samhain, can you see how they are two completely different holidays? I love Halloween. I think it's so much fun to dress up in costumes. I am a costume girl. Like, glitter is my spirit animal. It's a thing. I am going to get dressed up tonight for a Halloween party, and I'm super pumped about it. Do I consider it to be related to my Samhain ritual? Not at all. So, for you parents out there who might believe differently than I do, I hope this can put you at rest. Your 10-year-old dressing up as Pikachu is not doing anything besides participating in an intentional American experience. And I hope you do too, because it's a lot of fun. So, how are we all feeling? Did you guys know that stuff about Halloween? It's very interesting to me how our culture came to be today and the roots from where it comes from. So I would love to hear from you. You can hit me up on the Soul Method Facebook page, which is at the Soul Method Yoga, or you can shoot me an email, which is my first name, Joelle, Joelle, at the.SoL.method.com. Next week, we are going to continue this trend and get more into the metaphysical. And until then, you guys, I hope you have an awesome Halloween. Until next time.